I figured I'd jump on a call here and talk with you about why masculinity is so important. I hope that you guys believe it is. If you don't believe it is, I'm not sure what you're doing here at Order of Man, because that's what we're talking about. We're talking about masculinity, we're talking about manliness, which are two different things. I'll explain in a minute. We're talking about being better men. We're talking about stepping into the role of protector, provider, and presider. The same roles that we've been doing for thousands of years. Yes, some might say traditional gender roles, but I'd have you wonder or consider why it is they're traditional gender roles. Could it be that it's because we are uniquely designed and hardwired to behave a certain way? The answer is yes, if you think that's a rhetorical question. The answer to that is yes. There is hormones and chemicals raging and racing through our bodies, both men and women, that cause us to behave a certain way. And the way that we behave is critical for the advancement of ourselves and our families and our businesses and our communities and all of the areas in which we serve. I don't know why this is so controversial, but it is. So I'm here to set the record straight. Now, I made a post the other day, I think it was yesterday, maybe even this morning, it all kind of blends together, about masculinity and what masculinity is. And I said masculinity is courage, masculinity is risk-taking, masculinity is physical, mental, and emotional strength, masculinity is aggression, masculinity is even violence. And some people have pushed back on that. I've seen a video by a company called Bonobos that talks about evolving the definition. Basically, they want to hijack what masculinity is or what it means and make it mean what they think it means, which is femininity. Again, I'll talk about that in a minute. I also saw another video that said something to the effect of masculinity, it doesn't even matter how it's defined. It's pretty crazy. It's pretty crazy. I don't quite understand why there's this dismissal and attack on masculinity itself, other than, and this is one of the conclusions I've come to, is that men represent the last line of defense against the powers that would be and their ultimate climb and ascension to power and the maintenance of that power. Individual, free-thinking, strong, courageous, bold, assertive, aggressive, and sometimes violent men are a threat to those that would walk over the rest of us. And so we are naturally the protectors, the providers, and the presiders of ourselves, our families, our businesses, and our communities. So it's important to understand why we need to harness and why we need to embrace the idea of masculinity. I don't think that it's the majority of people that are dismissing this. I think it's a very loud, a very vocal minority who wants to downplay the importance of masculinity. Guys, it's critical, and here's why. When the wolf, and I've talked about this before, comes knocking at the door, it's the men who are designed through thousands and thousands of years to ward off the wolf, to ward off the threat. And that wolf manifests himself in violent situations, violent encounters, opposition, physical opposition to our own well-being and safety and security and freedom and liberty. It could be a natural disaster or some other sort of emergency. Men will always be called upon to ward off the wolf. And if you downplay the importance of masculinity, or you try to redefine it and make it more about femininity, what's going to end up happening is that when that wolf comes knocking at the door, there'll be no men to answer the call. And so we'll get run over. We'll find ourselves in situations in which we and the people that we care about, the people we love, and the people that we're here to protect are in a compromising situation. So you can't just take a word and hijack it and make it mean whatever the hell you want. I guess you can, you have a right to do that, but it's not a good thing. There is a difference between being masculine and being a man. Understand this. There is a difference between being masculine and being a man. And this is where people get so confused on what this means. They're so confused, they're so misguided, and we're getting this narrative that is absolutely ridiculous at best and destructive and a threat to the well-being of people everywhere at worst. So masculinity, again, for those of you who are jumping on late, is about courage. It's about taking risks. We've been taking risks for thousands of years. That's how we actually evolve and grow and expand, through calculated risk taking. It's about courage. It's about being strong physically, mentally, emotionally. It's about all those things. It's about aggression, dominance even, violence, and those are all desirable traits and qualities in men. Now, please hear me on this and understand this. A man can be masculine, and separate from that, a man can also be feminine. A man at times can exhibit masculine traits and characteristics, and other times exhibit feminine characteristics and traits. Why? Because the chemicals racing through our bodies, this is biology, this is science, this debate has been settled long ago, dictates the way that we behave. So, the more testosterone that we have coursing through our veins, and there's other chemicals as well. I read a really good book called The Male Brain. I can't remember the author. I'll have to look at that. Anyways, The Male Brain, she talks about the chemicals that are racing through our bodies as men, and she also has a book called the Female Brain, and it talks about the chemicals going through women's bodies as well. Now, we all have varying degrees of testosterone and estrogen. Those are the primary hormones and chemicals that are going through our bodies that dictate the way that we behave as men and women. So a man can exhibit masculine traits and characteristics based on the testosterone that's coursing through his veins. He can also, and you can be a man, gentlemen, you can be a man if you exhibit more feminine traits than masculine traits. You've got to understand that. All right? That's why I see some very feminine men, quite frankly, who I would still consider men. Because they're still being protectors, they're still being providers, they're still being presiders, and yet they tap more into their feminine energy. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with masculine energy. There's nothing wrong with feminine energy. And we all display and exhibit certain characteristics at certain times based on the situation. When we're exhibiting love and kindness and compassion and empathy and nurturing, which I do from time to time, I'm exhibiting feminine characteristics. That doesn't make me a woman. That doesn't make me less of a man. It doesn't even mean I'm gay. It just means that I'm tapping into my feminine energy, the chemicals that are, yes, going through my body as well. I don't know why this is so hard. I don't know why this is so challenging for people. I don't know why this is controversial. It's not bad. Men and women are not at odds with each other. In fact, we complement each other. In fact, we both have varying degrees of these hormones coursing through our bodies and our veins and our biology and makeup that let us behave certain ways. But guys, at the end of the day, it's critical that we embrace masculinity, that we understand that there's nothing negative or toxic about it, and that we can use these characteristics of aggression and dominance and competitiveness and risk-taking and courage and violence to produce productive outcomes. Because look, here's the deal. When shit hits the fan, people don't call on the women. I love women. My wife's a woman. My daughter's a woman. My mom's a woman. I have friends that are women. I love women. I have anything wrong with women. But when shit hits the fan, my wife doesn't get the phone call. Guess who gets the phone call? I get the phone call. Because I'm the man. And I'm designed to react to that scenario. When there's an emergency, when there's a natural disaster, when there's a war, when there's a battle, when there's something that requires grit and toughness and resiliency and resolve and physical strength, the men get called. Now, that's not to say that women can't fulfill those roles, but on average, if you take occupations that display and exhibit a high quality of physical exertion, risk-taking, potential danger, you're gonna see more men in those positions. That's why you see more men in the military, more men as first responders. Again, not to say that women can't. Of course they can, because they can exhibit physical strength, mental strength, courage, risk-taking, but on the average, men are you're gonna see more of that in men than you are of women. It's not bad, guys. We as a society need to embrace both what it means to be a man and what it means to be a woman. Now, the other side of this coin is that an attack on masculinity is by default an attack on femininity. I can't tell you how often I hear people, women even, that will put other women down for deciding to stay at home. That to me is absurd, absolutely crazy. My wife has been a homemaker for 14 years, 13 years, somewhere right in there, maybe 12. I think 12 years. She's been a homemaker for 12 years. And there's women who will say, oh, I can't believe you let Ryan go out into the workforce and you're just staying at home. Just staying at home? Just staying at home? She turns our house into a home. She provides love and kindness and empathy and compassion and excitement and spontaneity into my life and into my children's lives. She's raising the future generations. If that isn't a critical role in society, I don't know what is. So when people say, oh, masculinity is bad, they're inherently saying femininity is bad as well, and that all of us should be the same. Newsflash, we're not. We're not all the same. And so trying to make everybody the same creates a lot of confusion. Is there any wonder why we see a rise in transgenderism, as if that's like a natural thing? I think people are just confused. We're confused as shit because we don't have men teaching boys how to be men. We don't have women teaching women how to be women. We don't have boys teaching their daughters how a real man shows up. We don't have women teaching their boys how a woman shows up. The more that we can embrace, and I'm going to swear here, these traditional gender roles, the better off we're all going to be. And that's not to say there aren't going to be certain men and women who fall outside of those categories. There certainly are, which is why we see a smaller percentage of men as school teachers, for example. Why? Because it's just not something that appeals to men as much as something that's going to be a little bit more aggressive and potentially even a little bit more dangerous. Guys, it's okay to be a man. It's important that we embrace masculinity. It's important and critical that we embrace femininity. And it's important that we understand that there's a difference between being masculine and being a man. That there's a difference between being feminine and being a woman. Those are just certain characteristics of each sex. Something to ponder about, something to think about, something to consider. I obviously am trying to champion this cause against the fight for, or the fight against masculinity and men in general. I think it's critical that we learn how to harness those skills that make us men in the first place for productive outcomes for our lives and the people that we care about. And I got to tell you, I'm honored you're on this journey with me. Thousands and thousands and thousands of men banding together, standing up, saying, yes, we are men. We will behave like men. We will act like men. And you can downplay that and you can ridicule and mock that all you want, but when shit hits the fan, we'll be ready for you to call upon us. Why? Because that's our job. And that's what we're designed to do. Anyways, I'd love to hear a discussion on this. Drop some comments. Let me know what you think. Agree, disagree. Let's have a conversation, a civil, respectful conversation about it, and let's come to some understanding on this thing so we can spread the message of masculinity in men everywhere. All right, guys, I'm going to go get my hair cut. Catch you guys soon.